Alrighty. So Mrs. Irvin, this is our FAU Thrive team that we have today on the call. My name is Alice. I'm the one who has been communicating with you this whole time. This is my first year here at Thrive. We also have Gwen. She is in charge of our blog content and also in posting. We also have Emily on the call. She is our social media and event coordinator. And we also have Dr. Laura Vernon. She is a professor of psychology here on the Wilkes Honors College of FAU campus. She is also the founder and director of FAU Thrive, but she unfortunately couldn't be here in the meeting. But we collectively as a team want to thank you so much for taking the time this morning to be here with us and discuss. So as a starting question, we would like to ask you to kind of give us a glimpse into like your training and background and what it is you kind of do in the field of psychology.
Sure. Thank you all for having me. When I received the email, I was really excited to participate. So as far as training goes, I have a master's degree in clinical psychology from the Michigan School of Psychology. And I had to do a couple different like practicum experiences in connection with that training to get that degree. And I worked in substance abuse, inpatient substance abuse work. And I also did a little bit of private practice, practicum. And after that, I knew that I wanted to be a clinical psychologist and go all the way for the doctorate. Um, but I wanted to take a year off to make sure and work in the field. And so I got a job after my master's degree in community mental health. And I was working as the children's substance use therapist. During that time, I saw all kids really from like, I think my youngest was like 4 up to, I think they served like up to maybe 18 or 19. Um, and so I did get a few like substance use cases, but the majority of my caseload was just general therapy. And because it was community mental health, these were people who tended to be lower socioeconomic status. They were Medicaid recipients. And so there I got to I guess, get the experience of serving that population and learn how many systemic barriers there are to receiving mental health care. After my year there, I was like, yep, I'm going back to school. It's decided. So I went back to school and I'm in the process of completing a 4-year doctorate program in clinical psychology. And what brings me to FAU is the final year in my program, I have to do a 2,000-hour internship. And so we had to go through a match process, and I was matched at FAU CAPS. I have worked in college counseling before with one of my practicum experiences for my doctorate program. So I knew I love like emerging adults, young people. I love kids and teens and families as well. So it felt like, I guess, like a natural transition to this because while our student population is definitely adults, a lot of the things that I tend to work on with them are some of the same concerns that younger people face, like teenagers, even of like, identity concerns, relationship issues, being away from home for the first time, figuring out who you are. Those are my favorite sorts of things to work with. So that's how I got here.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We greatly appreciate it. Now, I think Emily has the next set of questions.
Hi, I'm Emily. It's so nice to meet you. I'm so glad to talk to you.
Yeah.
So I just have a question regarding if there was a defining moment or a turning point in your professional or personal journey that made you decide that you wanted to go into psychology.
Hmm, definitely. I think there was a couple, but the first was probably when I was in high school. I was able to take an AP psychology course. And I was kind of interested in psychology, prior to this, but that was my first time actually like dipping my toe in. And like I absolutely loved it. Like I was like captivated every day in that class. And I was like, oh, okay, yes, like this is it. I found my thing. Um, I was just and I found myself particularly drawn to like the mental health aspect of psychology because for those that don't know, psychology is like a super broad field. There's research, there's all aspects of like human behavior and experience. And then the health aspect of it is just one piece, the clinical part. That was the part that I was felt myself drawn to the most. Um, and so I was like, yes, it's definitely going to be the mental health field for me. But I was initially like, okay, I want to do psychiatry. That was my thought in high school. Um, and then I got to undergrad. Those pre-med classes were not hitting the way they needed to hit. I I am not super well, I guess as a psychologist, it's technically under the sciences, but the chemistries and the biologies and all that stuff, like I realized that I wasn't willing to put forth the effort that I would have needed to put forth to get into medical school. And I was becoming like increasingly, I guess, disinterested in the idea of going to medical school. And as I learned more about what psychiatrists do, which is working more on like the medication aspect of things, I was like, I really like therapy more. I really see myself more in that area. So I let go of the idea of being a psychiatrist and I started volunteering at a crisis hotline. And that brings me to my second defining moment, which is I remember there was a veteran that called into the hotline. I didn't take the call. I was a new volunteer at that time, so I was like still shadowing. Um, and he was experiencing some suicidal ideation and, he had a plan in his life. And the way that that person helped him through that, the way that she sort of listened to him, sat with him, gave him some resources, and really validated, his feelings at the time. Um, I don't know. It like I feel like that really touched me. I remember driving away from like my crisis shift that day and like, wow, we can really help people. Like, this is not just theoretical. We can really use these skills to help people change the trajectory of their lives and, make different decisions for themselves. And so that was when I think I really locked in and I was like, oh, I'm going to do clinical psychology. Yeah.
That is incredible. I mean, you and others in the mental health field, you guys do amazing work. So kudos, kudos. I just wanted to ask, I mean, this is kind of like leading into the next question. You kind of already answered it, but have you faced any challenges in your professional or personal journey? And then if so, how did you overcome these challenges?
Hmm. Yes. I think I have faced quite a few personal and professional challenges, but what sticks out to me is that in between undergrad and pursuing my master's degree, I took probably about 5 years off and like worked in a completely different field. I worked in automotive logistics for a while. I worked in higher education administration for like 4 years. And I was like pretty miserable. It felt like I knew sort of like deep down that I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, but I think at that time I was like, oh, I don't know if I can actually do it. Like, what if I don't get into grad school or, what if it's too hard? So I think I was dealing with a lot of self-doubt. And so I was like pushing myself toward at what the time seemed like, I guess, the easier option or the more safe or comfortable path. And I wasn't happy. And I think it was one day where I was like, in my own personal therapy, I was like, you know, I don't think I'm going to be able to continue to do this other work knowing that I'm not pursuing the thing I really want to. And I remember my therapist at the time, she like looked over my personal statement. She was like really instrumental in like helping me get up the courage to apply. And, you know, we know the rest of the story, right? I got accepted and I'm here now. But um, I think for me, in thinking about like personal challenges, I think like that imposter syndrome and like self doubt really held me back from like pursuing this sooner. Um, yeah.
Wow, my goodness. And then for me, my last question is, why did you choose to pursue a doctor of psychology instead of, or maybe in place of a doctor of philosophy?
Okay. Well, often, and this varies by program, but generally, doctorate of psychology programs tend to be more practice focused. Um, the model, the way that students are trained is more practice oriented. A doctorate of psychology is a professional degree. And I knew like pretty early on that I wanted my training to focus primarily on clinical practice. And that is not to say that the PhD programs are not clinically focused. I think it sort of varies by program, but they tend to be more focused on research and teaching and sort of preparing you for an academic career, maybe like as a professor or a researcher. Plenty of PhDs go into clinical practice like full time. So um, it's not, I guess, black and white. But I think I chose the PsyD because I was really interested in the practice aspect and I wanted that to be emphasized in my training more. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I just have a couple questions for you now. So first I wanted to ask, is there anything or is there something that surprised you the most when you started going into the field of psychology?
Something that surprised me the most. Um, I think something that I don't think I considered as much before I got into my psychology program was how much personal work is involved. Um, in order to be a good clinician, in order to lead our clients, encourage them to go in the direction they want to go, we have to also be going somewhere and doing the work. Um, the work of a therapist, whether you're a psychologist, social worker, counselor, is very emotional work. Clients will say and do things that will trigger your own things, right? Whether that's trauma, whether that is, you know, family dynamics. It is a very, you bring yourself to therapy. That's what I always say. And so I think maybe what I hadn't considered or like before I started studying to be a clinician was wow, like I have to work on myself for real. I have to reconsider the messages that I got about all kinds of things. You know, the political messages I got, my relationship to my own identities, the messages I got about people who had other identities that I don't share. Um, how I was raised, all of that stuff had to be looked at and continually has to be looked at. It's like a lifelong process, I think. And that's something I feel like that's not maybe not emphasized as much as it should be to people who are considering going into this.
Absolutely. So changing gears just a little bit, is there a sort of maybe common case that you tend to see, especially working with kind of a population of college students?
Mm-hmm. Common case. I guess to speak broadly, like in college counseling, students often come to therapy when they're going through some sort of transition. That doesn't just apply to students. I think that applies to like most populations. But um, in college counseling, that tends to look like maybe this is a person's first time experiencing a breakup. And they're wanting to, get some help around that, or um, they are having trouble making friends and they're, super far away from home or experiencing social anxiety that's getting in the way of them maybe speaking up in class or going up to people, and doing some of the work involved in like creating new relationships and connections. That's a common one I see. We get the folks who maybe were straight A students in high school, and then they get the college course load, and they're not they're not making those A's, and things are like significantly harder, and they're maybe didn't have to study before, and now they have to study. And so struggling with um, separating themselves or their identity, self-image from like their academic achievement. Um, yeah, I think those are like common ones, I'd say.
So then kind of following that, is there a general approach that you have going into treatment?
Yeah. So I think in terms of maybe the last one I mentioned, the student who maybe like failed their first exam or is getting their first C or something like that. Um, what I like to do is first, of course, validate their concerns. This is extremely stressful for them. And I often I I practice from like a interpersonal lens. And so I'm always interested in, um, how did we get here? How do we get to the idea that who I am is, or, my worthiness is like really wrapped up in whether I make these A's. And so I like to explore with them like family history, what messages did you use or did you receive around what it meant to achieve academically, um, and how much of that um, still applies today. Like, are these messages things that we want to keep? Are they serving us or are they making our lives harder? So I like kind of helping them like sift through that. And then I guess more practically speaking, as far as like actionable things, is like sometimes it's like connecting them with resources. Like I know we have academic advising and like coaching here. There are study groups. And so sometimes it's like education around like, hey, this is what is available to you on campus. And why don't we try these things? Um, and what else? I think for students who are really struggling, and the therapy doesn't seem to be working as well as we'd like, some students I might begin to have a conversation about, hey, is medication something that you might want to try for now to manage some of the anxiety, to turn down the volume on like your symptoms a little bit so that you can actually study, so that you can engage in your work, helping them advocate for themselves with like professors sometimes who might be like less flexible with things. Um, so it can be a whole host of things. Does that answer the question?
Thank you so much. I have the next set of questions. I was just wondering, do you have any suggestions for students in regard to improving their like work-life balance in any way?
Hmm. I think improving work-life balance is about, um, I think recognizing that work-life balance, and this was like a big one for me that like kind of blew my mind when I learned this a couple years ago, actually. Um, that work-life balance is not, um, I don't know, 50% leisure and self-care and like 50% like hard work and productivity. That like realistically work-life balance, I think is like a bit more dynamic than that, meaning like maybe some weeks we are really, really engaged in our classes and devoting a lot of our time to studying and, maybe during finals or, during like crunch periods. And what our self-care looks like during that time might be things like just trying to get to bed on time or like, trying to get your meals in. And that might be balanced with like other times that are slower, where you have less classes, less coursework, less demand on your schedule, where you can like pour more deeply into your self-care. Maybe you can spend more time with your friends, or you can, I don't know, take some time off and go home for the weekend if that works, or like the idea that we need to have this like perfect balance week to week is unrealistic. So I would say that's what I would tell students, to like sort of rethink what work-life balance actually is and how it changes week to week or month to month based on like what's going on.
Thank you so much. That was beautifully said. And as a final question, do you have any final tips and tricks to offer students in adjusting to college?
Yeah, my main tip is not really a trick, but it is practical advice. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There's so many people here like whose literal job is dedicated to helping you. And it doesn't make you less than or less capable or less deserving to be here that you need help. And that's mental help, that's academic support, relationship support, whatever it is. It's like we there is no shame in like needing help. So I would say the top tip is to like tap into your resources. Don't be an island on this campus. Um, none of us are at our best when we aren't in community and like receiving support. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I completely agree. Well, that is all we had of questions for you today. And I think um, I would like to thank you again as part of the Thrive theme as a whole. We really appreciate you coming to talk to us and giving us some advice and speaking about your personal life and your journey. We hope to speak to you soon, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Oh, thank you so much. This was fun. And please contact me if you need anything else.
Of course.
And
Thank you so much.
students, come to CAPS.
Yes, we
Don't
will
be
do so.
scared.
Thank you.
Bye.